Hi, I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group here at Fed Talks, and we're here with Dan Chenok, Executive Director for the IBM Center for the Business of Government at IBM. Dan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Sure, Wyatt. Thanks for having me.
Well, let me start by asking, how have you seen technology in federal government play a critical role in 2020 in response to the unprecedented pandemic that has rocked the nation?
Well, certainly it's played a key role both in how government has changed the nature of the work that it does in terms of conducting work from home. The government moved very quickly, as did the contractor community who supports government. Within a matter of weeks, really, just about all of the work that could be done from home was. And there were a lot of predictions that technology would move this way over time over the next 5 to 10 years. And it kind of happened in about 2 weeks. And a lot of that was because CIOs and technology teams focused a lot on sort of the durability of their networks, the cybersecurity of the connections, and were able to put in place sort of a management and technology frame that people could fit into to continue their jobs. Certainly, all of us were working from home and continue to do so, as evidenced by our backgrounds on this interview. I'd also say that technology helped the government very quickly deliver services in a needed way. So it wasn't just government doing their job, working with each other. It was government connecting with citizens, with members of the public, receiving services, but at the federal, state, and local level. And so technology played a key role in both sort of the internal workings of government and in the external. And then the last point I'd make is sort of in direct response and recovery to COVID-19 activity is sort of technology is an enabler of healthcare services and social services specifically. Technology providing data for monitoring sort of spread of the disease, enabling contact tracing at the local level, powering supply chains to deliver needed supplies and material, both health and social services supplies. And we did a report recently that the IBM Center released on innovation in government by a very reputable leader in the technology space, Dr. Alan Shark, who's a fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration. And Alan interviewed a number of leaders of technology, sort of in terms of how they are innovating and using technology. And in this last point, a couple of examples. The Department of Health and Human Services put up HHS Protect, which is sort of a lot of data that was very informative for government officials and stakeholders, sort of understanding patterns of disease activity and surveillance and monitoring and response. And they're looking at moving that onto a blockchain. So an example of how technology can move forward. And then at the local level, Sonoma County in California is using a powerful combination of technologies to provide sort of a 360-degree view of services to their individuals. And Carolyn Statz, who's one of the leaders of the technology effort there, has done a great job kind of leading activity and providing a model for the rest of the country.
Well, given those examples, how can federal government leapfrog ahead, if you will, in using modern and emerging technologies like cloud and AI and automation?
So I think a couple of things, and again, the report's very informative on this topic. One is learn from best practice. There's a lot of examples of CIOs that have moved forward. Dave Shive, the CIO at the General Services Administration, has done a terrific job in terms of his work as a leader. And one of the Alan's report also talked about characteristics of leaders in terms of leapfrogging and sort of what are some of the mindsets they need to act in this way, and being entrepreneurial, sort of being able to understand what's new, what's novel, how to take advantage of that. At the same time, being collaborative. A great entrepreneurial idea can only be put in practice by a team, and that team often has government employees, often has contractor employees, nonprofits, academic partners, and even citizens at the local level who are directly involved in service provision. So being collaborative and then being adaptive, being able to change with changing circumstances. As we all know, we often hear the phrase, I feel like the last 2 weeks has been, the equivalent of 2 years. So being able to pivot quickly in the world we're living in, where change is a constant, requires an adaptive mindset. Sort of understanding technology at the core level, of course, continues to be as emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, blockchain, the advent of quantum computing come into play, having technology leaders who are not just conversant, but sort of leading the discussion about how to adapt those technologies to government. is key. And then skilled leadership. And I mentioned Dave Shive at GSA. Another skilled leader that was reported on was Dorothy Aronson, the CIO at NSF, who's done just terrific work. NSF's mission in many ways is researching the next wave of innovation. And Dorothy has sort of adapted that mission into her role as a CIO and moving her workforce forward. One other point is sort of looking at the full picture of technology, looking across the different suites around artificial intelligence, blockchain, this sort of whole suite of intelligence automation technologies that enable leaders to sort of integrate what is best commercial practice in a lot of ways to government, and to be able to do that in a way that's rapid and sort of innovative from a budget and procurement perspective. So the last example I'll cite again is one from GSA. They have a 10X initiative where they look at sort of providing seed money for interesting new ideas, and then using their budget and procurement flexibilities to try hopefully expand those ideas that go through the process and make them scalable in practice.
Well, those are some great examples. Speaking of being adaptable, how are you seeing the federal government working in new and potentially creative ways to bring talented technologists to its workforce?
Yeah, I think interestingly, new hiring models that were first started almost 10 years ago now with the Presidential Innovation Fellows and the U.S. Digital Service and the GSA 18F program are looking at as sort of how do we expand the ability of the government to bring in top technology talent into government, either for a tour of duty or for a longer period of time. There are training opportunities where government is bringing in, is working with industry to basically build a collaborative workforce. And an example of that is the Army's Training with Industries program, where the Army actually sends out people who are sort of rising stars in their ranks to spend a year in industry. And IBM and other companies have been a part of this. Our center has worked with this program for a number of years. And then they go back having learned sort of best practice in industry and help enrich the government with their skill set. Things like the Cyber Reskilling Academy that was started by OMB enables cybersecurity people who aren't cybersecurity experts to become skilled in that space. And then there is a lot of activity now around increasing the pipeline of new hires in terms of training and education with colleges and universities, and a lot of activities and partnerships. IBM's partnership with the historic Black College and universities across the country around quantum computing and technology is an example of this. So a lot of new and interesting academic partnerships.
Well, lastly, Dan, you have a great vista on innovation at work in government. What trends or priorities do you have on your radar that you're keeping an eye on as we head into 2021?
Right. So I think you'll see a lot of advance on data. You'll see sort of technologies that bring data into sort of new ways of analytical capacity for government. So creating the ability to look across what's happening in different spaces. You look at agencies like NOAA, which takes weather data and sort of rebuilds it through a technology interface to enable first responders to see technology in different ways through, for example, blockchain technology, or eventually, hopefully, supplying supply chains with information about what's happening in weather patterns so that you can anticipate delivery times and understand through more precise weather prediction, sort of how that can interfere or enable a delivery of material and goods across the world. You're seeing data that's coming through high performance computing and data that's being used to improve service. And I mentioned the VA example earlier, where the Department of Veterans Affairs is using data to deliver services to veterans more effectively. And the study that I mentioned earlier talked about Shmendra Paul's work as the Chief Data Officer at VA, kind of leading that work. And then I think you'll see advances in emerging technology, where new leaders are coming in agencies across the government who are looking at, how do we drive artificial intelligence, robotics process automation, other emerging technologies to improve the way that agencies perform their mission, the effectiveness by which they deliver services. An interesting example of this at the state level is the CIO of the state of Utah, which in our report, the CIO, Mike Hussey, basically put together an AI center of excellence for the state that's really proved to be an innovative model for other states to learn from. So I think you'll see a number of activities, both on the data and the technology side, moving forward.
Well, Dan Chamak, thank you so much for taking time to join us here at Fed Talks and sharing some of your insights on the technology space within government.
Thank you, Wyatt.